Now, as a part of the fundamentals of the Indian Constitution, we have seen what are meant by the fundamental rights and what are the different fundamental rights which are available to the citizens of the country. But those kind of fundamental rights will have no meaning if there is no redressal mechanism given under the law. There is a saying under the law which says that where there is a right, there is a remedy. That is, wherever the rights of a particular individual has been infringed, there must be a remedy. There must be a remedy where he can go to the courts, he can seek redressal, he can seek any kind of redressal or any action from the state to compensate for the damage which has been caused to him. So, this takes us to one of the most crucial and the heart and soul of the fundamental rights, that is known as right to constitutional remedies. Right to constitutional remedies, which itself says that in the case of violation of any fundamental right conferred under Part 3 of the Constitution, the citizen or a foreigner has right to even move the Supreme Court of India for seeking redressal. So, now we will see what is that fundamental right to constitutional remedies. Right to constitutional remedies is exclusively dealt under Article 32 of the Indian Constitution, which gives the right to the individuals whose right has been violated by the state, that is the government, to approach directly the Supreme Court for seeking redressal. So, how? Through which manner? Through the filing of writs. Writs are specialized petitions which are filed before the constitutional courts, that is high courts and the Supreme Court of India. Here we are speaking about filing of writs before the Supreme Court of India under Article 32. So, there are various kinds of writs, and writs are discretionary remedies. If the court is convinced that your fundamental rights have been violated, then the court can allow that particular writ and give you the remedy. So, what are the different kinds of writs? Writs are of 5 kinds, that is writs of habeas corpus, that is it is filed when a person has been illegally detained by someone. Next one is writ of mandamus, that is to direct the government authorities to do something or not to do something. Then you have writs of prohibition, which prohibits any authority or any court from entertaining any kind of action which is beyond its jurisdiction or beyond its power. Then you have writ of certiorari, that is if any authority or court has given an order which it should not have passed, or it does not have the power to pass such kind of orders, against that particular authorities or courts you can file the writ of certiorari. And then you have writ of quo warranto, that is if a person has been holding a public office without any kind of qualification to hold it, then his authority can be challenged on the grounds and various grounds, and by filing a writ of quo warranto, that is with what authority can be filed to seek the justice. So, fundamental rights are not the only fundamental rights, but right to move the Supreme Court of India for the enforcement of fundamental right itself is a fundamental right. That is, it is the soul of Part 3 of the Constitution. If you remove this Article 32, then there is no mechanism in through which you can enforce your fundamental rights. So, Article 32 you can say it is the soul of the Indian Constitution. Now, we are always speaking or bantering about rights, human rights, fundamental rights, the third world rights, rights, etc. But we as a citizen or as a foreigner, we usually miss out the most crucial thing, that is the duty, that is the fundamental duties. Always remember, where there is a right, there is also a corresponding duty. So, Indian Constitution initially did not have the chapter of fundamental duties, but nevertheless it was introduced through constitutional amendment, and now we will see what is meant by fundamental duties. Fundamental duties. Fundamental duties outline the moral and civic responsibilities of every citizen. They outline the moral and civic responsibility which every citizen is having towards the country. Mere enjoying the rights itself is not enough. As a citizen, you are supposed to discharge certain moral and civic duties towards the country. Ask not what the country has done for you, tell what you have done for the country. So, the fundamental duties usually speak about this particular aspect, that is what you are going to do for the country and what is your civic or moral responsibility as a citizen towards your country. So, they have been introduced to uphold the sovereignty, integrity and values of the nation. Sovereignty, integrity and values of the nation. These wordings can be found in preamble also. To uphold, to ensure the fraternity for the purpose of unity and integrity of the nation. This integrity and unity, these expressions you can find in the preamble itself. They clearly speak about the constitutional values, the obligations which the citizens are under. It was added through 42nd Constitutional Amendment 1976. Initially, it was not there. So, based upon the Russian constitution, that is erstwhile USSR constitution, this concept of fundamental duties was inserted by way of 42nd Constitutional Amendment 1976. And they have added an article, that is 51A. So, all the 11 fundamental duties are included within the ambit of Article 51A of the Constitution. Just after finishing of the chapter of fundamental directive principles of state policy, you have 51A, which speaks about the fundamental duties. And it was, as I told you earlier, it was inspired by the Soviet Union's constitution, that is the constitution of USSR. So, fundamental duties outline the civic and moral responsibilities of the citizen towards India. So, what are those? Now we will see. First one is respecting the constitution, national flag and national anthem. These three are the national symbols: constitution, national flag and national anthem. It is the duty as a citizen to respect all these three. Then follow the ideals of the freedom struggle. The ideals of the freedom struggle, which we have got after nearly fighting for a century and a half. So, those ideals and the teachings and the learnings which were given by the freedom fighters and founding fathers of the nation should be cherished and it should be followed. Next one is uphold the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. To ensure that as a citizen you uphold the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. Next one is to defend the country and render national service. So, you are supposed to defend your country and also render national service. So, national service in certain countries like Israel and other European countries, you have something called as military conscription, which means that in order to become eligible for employment in that particular country, you have to compulsorily serve in the military. So, in India, it is not such kind of, you don't have such kind of requirement, but in future, if the country imposes such kind of requirement, then it is your fundamental duty to render service to the nation. Next one is to promote harmony and brotherhood. To promote harmony and brotherhood amongst various people in the country, to ensure brotherhood and the feeling of oneness amongst the Indians. Then you have preserve the rich heritage, cultural heritage and historical legacy of India. Not only the historical legacy, but the symbols of historical legacy like historical monuments, etc. have to be protected by the citizens. Why? Because it is the part of our history and culture. Then to protect the environment. So, the environmental protection, forests and wildlife come under this particular category. As a citizen, you are bound to protect the environment, to ensure that you protect the forests and the wildlife. Why? Because they are also part of the country's legacy. They are also the part of this particular country. Then develop a scientific temper and spirit of inquiry. Scientific temper means to have scientific approach towards any particular thing, not to believe in any kind of rumors or unscientific or rumors or rumor mongering which is there in many social media apps, etc. So, to have a scientific temper and to have a spirit of inquiry, to know what is the truth. So, that is one of the duty as the citizen. Then you have safeguard the public property and avoid violence. You have to safeguard the public property. Why? Because it belongs to all of us, and to avoid violence. To avoid violence, where weak may be killed by the strong. So, you have to avoid the violence and avoid damage to the public property. Then strive for excellence in all spheres. Do excel in all fields of life. Let it be medicine, etc. All the fields which can bring some sort of reputation and fame to the country. Then provide education to all children. So, it was added under 86th Constitutional Amendment 2002. So, here to provide compulsory education to the children is one of the duty. It is the duty of the parents and wards to ensure that the child between the ages of 6 to 14 are educated. So, this was initially this was there under Article 50, Directive Principle of State Policy. Then it was made as a fundamental duty by virtue of 86th Constitutional Amendment 2002. Now, this takes us to one of the legal aspect of the fundamental duties. Unfortunately, it is not enforceable in the court of law. Remember, fundamental duties, unlike fundamental rights which can be directly enforced in the court of law, fundamental duties cannot be enforced in the court of law. Fundamental duties, in the case of violation of fundamental duties, you cannot be punished. However, there is this particular catch, but the violation of fundamental duties is punishable if it is made as a separate law. For example, one of the fundamental duties says to uphold the sovereignty, unity and integrity of the nation. If someone violates that sovereignty, unity or integrity of the nation, directly he is not punishable. But damaging the sovereignty, unity and integrity of the nation, it is one of the offence under Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, and if you violate that particular law, then you are made punishable. So, directly a person cannot be held liable for the violation of fundamental duties. However, if that fundamental duty has been made into a separate law and that law punishes that kind of conduct, then yes. The best example is this thing, destruction of public property. You may not be held guilty of violating your fundamental duty, but you can be held violating the criminal laws of the country, the penal laws of the country. So, always remember, the violation of fundamental duties per se is not punishable. However, if that fundamental duty has been incorporated into a separate act or made into a separate law which itself punishes such kind of conduct, then yes, you will be guilty under that particular law. But directly they cannot say that you are guilty of violation of your fundamental duty. Now, this is one of the shortcomings of the fundamental duties. Then this takes us to the most crucial aspect, that is directive principles of the state policy, or also known as DPSP. Now, directive principles of state policy, they have been borrowed from the Irish Constitution, where it is mentioned as instrument of instructions. So, what are these things? Directive principles, as the name itself says, it provides some sort of guidance, direction. These principles direct the state policy. These principles direct how the government should work. For every 5 years or so, we have elections. We find the newly elected government taking over and also the outgoing government handing down the power to the newly elected government. But here we will see that even though the elected representatives may come and go and may change, nevertheless, the policy of the state continues in a linear fashion, that is without any kind of breakage. It does not matter if the CM is changed or PM is changed, the basic foundation of the Indian political system, the functioning of the state machinery, the state policy decisions, they most likely remain the same. They do not change. Why? Because there is something called as directive principles of state policy. These directive principles of state policy are nothing but guiding principles of governance. They are the guiding principles of the governance. If you rule by the book, then it is called as rule. But if the governance is done in accordance with the constitution which is acceptable by the people, then only you can call it as governance. The rule, as per the rule of law, then you can only call it as governance. So, how the government policy should be, how it should go on. So, it is all based upon certain principles given under Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, which speaks about directive principles of the state policy. So, they are enshrined under Part 4 from Articles 36 to 51. 36 to 51 speak about the guiding principles which the country should follow, which the governments, whatever government may be, central government or the state governments, they must follow in the governance of the country. As I told you, it is inspired by the Irish constitution, wherein it was mentioned as instrument of instructions. Here we have used the wider expression, that is directive principles of the state policy. So, state policy, how it should be guided, directive principles of state policy direct or lay down the principles in the manner in which the state policy should be made. It was inserted with the aim to establish a welfare state. These days, the states are not police state. Police state means any state which maintains law and order. Other than that, it will not do any kind of thing. So, in India, you cannot afford to have a police state. So, we are speaking about a welfare state which speaks about the welfare of the maximum population through the government policies. So, to ensure the welfare state, we should go through certain principles, we should follow certain principles. So, those principles are known as directive principles of the state policy. So, directive principles of state policy are not enforceable in the courts of law, and you cannot file the writs before the court to enforce the directive principles of state policy. So, they are only met. So, initially when this directive principles of state policy was made, the constitution makers thought that they should not be making it mandatory for the state. Why? Because at the time of independence, we had limited financial resources, whereas the directive principles of state policy were speaking about very high goals which could not have been achieved through substantial spending by the state. So, we were poor, we cannot afford to have such kind of goals. So, what they have said is, let them be the guiding force but not mandatory. So, with the passage of time, when the treasury of the state will be more and more directive principles can be achieved. So, they have fixed it as a target which is preferably to be achieved by the state, but it is not mandatory to achieve. But nevertheless, many of the directive principles of state policy have been followed by the state governments from time to time with limited success and absolute success in certain areas. Then they are classified under three categories. Number one, socialistic principles, that is the principles which aim at the socialism. Next one is Gandhian principles that are based upon the Gandhian ideals. Then you have liberal intellectual principles which are wider and speaking about the liberal and intellectual ideals. How they are classified, we will see in detail. Socialistic principle, they promote social and economic justice. Social and economic justice is one of the goal of Indian democracy, which you can find in the preamble. The first and foremost thing is Article 38, which speaks about ensuring a just social order. Just social order where the justice prevails, not the rule of the might, but a social order where the justice prevails and where both powerful and the weak are placed on the same pedestal. So, that is your Article 38. Then you have Article 39, which speaks about equal pay for equal work and protection of workers. Various labor laws, etc., derive their force from Article 39. So, land ceiling acts, distribution of wealth, assignment of lands, protection, workmen compensation, so minimum wages, all these things derive their power from one of the most important articles in the directive principle of state policy, that is Article 39. Then you have Article 41, which speaks about right to work, right to provide education and also public assistance, legal aid, etc., comes within this particular category. 43 speaks about living wages and decent conditions for the workers. So, labor welfare legislations will come under Article 43 also, speaks about safe working conditions for the laborers, ensuring the minimum wages are given to them. And then you have Article 47, which speaks about improvement of public health and nutrition. So, all the National Food Security Act, then providing medicines to the pregnant women, girl child, etc., Anganwadi system, etc., they all derive their powers from Article 47, which speaks about improvement of public health and nutrition. So, these socialistic principles demand that the state play a greater role in ensuring the welfare of the laborers, ensure the welfare of the workmen and also women in the country. So, they are usually aimed at promoting social and economic justice, which is one of the most important ideal in the preamble to the Indian Constitution. Then we have Gandhian principles. We have seen that how Mahatma Gandhi has played a crucial role in the Indian freedom struggle and also for attainment of Swaraj, that is based on Satyagraha. So, Gandhian principles had played a crucial role in shaping the outward policy of the state. So, all the Gandhian principles speak about the Gandhi's vision of rural development and self-sufficiency. So, Mahatma Gandhi had always advocated the development of grassroots democracy, that is from the village level. He in fact went on to say that development, the true India lies in the villages. So, from the very basic scratch you are supposed to start if you want to speak about the development of the country. It cannot happen from the capital cities to the villages, but it has to be in the other way, that is from the villages to the capital cities. So, how the Gandhian principles are incorporated in the directive principles, we will see. Article 40 speaks about establishment of Panchayati Raj. Establishment of Panchayati Raj, that is at the grassroots levels, at the village levels. So, you have the entire enactment, Panchayat Raj Act, etc., Ministry of Panchayat Raj, the Gram Panchayats, Gram Sabhas and all, they all derive their power from Article 40. That is which speaks about establishment of Panchayati Raj in the villages for the local governance. It is better to have local governance than to have a centralized governance. Then you have Article 43, which speaks about promotion of cottage industries. Cottage industries, in fact, play a significant role in the economy. So, promotion of cottage industries like khadi, etc. Now, we may not have khadi industry, it is in the industrial level, but when we speak about the cottage industries, you have small self-help groups, Dwakra, etc. All these things come under the category of promotion of cottage industries. Then we have Article 46, which speaks about protection of the interests of SCs, STs and weaker sections. So, Gandhiji was instrumental in fighting for the rights of the oppressed people, Harijans and Dalits, etc. So, Article 46 gives an obligation on the state to protect the interests of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and other weaker sections of the public from being exploited or being oppressed by the other section of the public. So, protection to the SCs, STs and other backward classes, etc. come within the purview of Article 46. Then you have 48. Article 48, which speaks about promotion of agriculture and animal husbandry. Agriculture and animal husbandry is one of the basic industries in this country. At the time of independence, we can see that overwhelming majority of the country was dependent upon the agriculture and animal husbandry. So, when we speak about the promotion of agriculture and animal husbandry, we will see that this provides an important source of alternate income for the farmers. So, if agriculture is failed, then animal husbandry is there to help him. So, agriculture and animal husbandry are both the allied activities which must be protected and which must be guarded to ensure the regular income to the farmers who were in majority at that particular point of time. Then you have 48A, which speaks about protection and improvement of the environment. Protection and improvement of the environment. Environment is necessary. Why? Because you cannot expect a person to live in a very crucial or in a hostile environment where he cannot breathe. Every person has something called as right to wholesome environment, that is unspoiled environment to live. So, you cannot expect the person to live in the dirty polluted atmosphere where he will die. So, environmental protection is also given under Articles 48A, which is one of the Gandhian principles of the directive principles of state policy, one of the category of the directive principles of state policy known as the Gandhian principles. That takes us to the next area, that is liberal intellectual principles. Now, these liberal intellectual principles are aimed to ensure modernization of the nation, global cooperation and individual freedom. Global cooperation and individual freedom. So, liberal intellectual, as the name itself indicates, it speaks about the liberalized version of the world where there is an intellectual thoughts. So, intellectual thoughts should go into the making of the state policy. So, how? they ensure modernization. Why? Because in this world, you cannot still hang on to your historical roots and say that you are developed. You have to go along with the flow, along with the globalization which is happening. So you require modernization. So the policies are aimed at modernization. Then global cooperation. You cannot exist as a hermit country like North Korea and all. You cannot exist like a hermit country. You require global cooperation for your existence in the world itself, for economic opportunities, for the purpose of having any kind of aid, for the purpose of having any kind of security deals, etc. It has to be done. So for the purpose of global cooperation and also individual freedom. Not only this thing, individual should go beyond the basic freedoms to the next level. So where it will be found? It will be found in the directive principles of state policy, which are classified under liberal or liberal and intellectual principles. Now, the first and foremost thing is, we will see Article 44, which speaks about Uniform Civil Code, which is much debated. Uniform Civil Code is nothing but a common law which is applicable to all the people. So, majority of the laws in India are applicable to people cutting across the religious communities, minorities, etc. But Uniform Civil Code exclusively speaks with regard to the personal laws. So, here we will see that in India at present, we have uniform laws which are in majority, but there is a section of those laws which apply to the different persons based upon their religious affiliation. So, on the topics of marriage, matrimony, matrimonial relations, etc., and succession, adoption, all these areas of law are dealt with respect to the religion of the communities. Hindu, they are dealt by the Hindu code, Muslims by their Muslim laws, Christians according to their own laws. So, when it comes to the matrimonial relations and matters pertaining to the succession and all, you have separate laws in accordance with the religion. So, Uniform Civil Code tries to bring a secular law, that is a law just like any other uniform law which is applied all the persons without any discrimination. Uniform Civil Code tries to bring a uniform civil law which is applicable even in the matrimonial matters of succession, etc. Then you have Article 45, which speaks about free and compulsory education for children. Free and compulsory education for children, which itself was later on turned into fundamental right under Article 21A. Free and compulsory education to the children between the ages of 6 to 14. That is when the cognitive development of the child will be at peak. So, today's responsible child, today's educated child will be tomorrow's responsible citizen. So, to ensure that particular aspect, we have the directive principle of state policy that is given under Article 45, which speaks about free and compulsory education for the children. That takes us to the next article, that is Article 48, which speaks about modernizing of agriculture and industries. Modernizing of agriculture and industries. We cannot still rely on the subsistence agriculture which we had earlier. Why? Because now the country is more advanced, you have much population to feed, and you cannot rely on the foreign imports of food. So, to that particular effect, you have to modernize the agriculture and industries. You have to modernize the agriculture and industries. Both in agriculture and industries, we have seen that India has succeeded to a very large extent. India is one of the leading exporter of food grains. It is the leading producer of dairy industries. So, for modernization and industries, you require this thing, modernization. Then you have Article 49, which speaks about protection of monuments and cultural heritage, which form the crucial part of our culture. It has to be protected. Then you have Article 50, which openly speaks about separation of judiciary from executive, also known as separation of powers. Then you have Article 51, which speaks about promotion of international peace and cooperation. Article 51 speaks about promotion of international peace and cooperation between the nations. So, directive principles of state policy, even though they are not enforceable in the courts of law, they are nevertheless to be followed by they are fundamental in the governance of a particular country. If you do not have directive principles of state policy, then you can expect the policy of the state to change again and again, which is going to affect the country's growth and detriment. So, here we have seen the fundamentals, that is fundamental rights, fundamental duties and the directive principles of state policy. So, in our next presentation, we will be speaking about the structure of the governance.